Didn't the Korean War end in 1953? The short answer is no. Hong Kong CNN. Is the Korean War about to come to an end? Some people might answer, didn't that happen in 1953? Others may know that it was only an armistice that brought the hostilities to the heart in 1953. But there's never been a treaty to end the conflict between North Korea and its chief ally China and South Korea and its allies, most notably the United States. With the top South Korean diplomat on Wednesday saying Seoul and Washington have effectively agreed on a draft agreement to end the war. Here's the primer on what that means. What was the Korean War? The war broke out on June 25th, 1950, when the first of what the US military estimates as 135,000 North Korean forces stormed across the 38 parallel dividing North and South Korea in an effort to take total control of the Korean peninsula. The United States, under President Harry Truman, responded with what was called a police action, assembling a group of international allies under the auspices of the United Nations Command to come to an aid of South Korea. 22 nations contributed combat troops or medical support units to the US-led effort. Communist-controlled North Korea had the support of both the Soviet Union and China, with Beijing actively intervening on the military front in October 1950, sending almost 250,000 troops into the Korean peninsula as the US-led forces were advancing toward China's border with North Korea. Chinese support of the North pushes the UN advance back down the peninsula, and by 1951, stalemate emerged along the 38 parallel, where the border between the two Koreas sit together. How did the fighting stop? Armistice talks began in 1951 and occurred intermittently until a final agreement to end combat was made on Panmunjom on the 38th parallel on July 27, 1953. Within 3 days, both sides withdrew their troops to be at least 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles from the ceasefire line. A US M4A3 Sherman tank convoy travels along the Punchilin Pass in North Korea in 1950. Why didn't the armistice end the war? The signatories of the July 27, 1953 agreement to end the hostilities were the heads of the UN command, the North Korean army, and of Chinese troops on the Korean peninsula. South Korea is not assigned, and the agreement specifically says it's not a peace treaty. According to the armistice preamble, it is made in the interest of stopping the Korean conflict with its great toil of suffering and bloodshed on both sides, and with the object of establishing an armistice which will ensure a complete cessation of hostilities and all acts of armed force in Korea until a final peaceful settlement is achieved. The Canadian officers under the United Nations Command read about the 1953 armistice on the Korean Peninsula. What has happened since 1953? There was no official contact between the North and South Korean government until 1971, according to the U.S. State Department. By By 1991, though, tensions had eased enough that Pyongyang and Seoul signed onto the North-South Basic Agreement, which said reunification was a goal of both parties. But a State Department history says the North's budding weapons programs and the death of its longtime leader Kim Il sung in 1994, coupled with political turmoil in the South, led to new tensions. The first inter Korean summit was held in June 2000, but though two it provided ended with North Korea's admission in 2002 that it was pursuing nuclear weapons. That admission led to the series of negotiations about the North Sea nuclear program among North Korea, China, Russia, South Korea, the US, and Japan, known as the Six Party Talks. North Korea pulled out of that effort in 2009 after restarting its Yongbyon nuclear reactor and launching a series of missile tests. In 2007, South Korean President Roh Moo-hyun and North Korean leader Kim Jong-il met in Pyongyang and agreed to try to bring peace to the reunified peninsula without the intervention of outside parties. But conservative Lee Myung-bak was elected South Korean president a few months later and switched to the hard line on the North's weapons program, chilling peace effort. Tensions thawed again in 2018 when North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with South Korean President Moon Jae-in in Panmunjom. The two said they would work to turning the 1953 armistice into a peace treaty. Later that year, the two met again in Pyongyang and signed a joint declaration to pursue denuclearization while working toward peace on the peninsula. Three meetings between US President Donald Trump and Kim, the first between a sitting US President and the North Korean leader, also failed to make any progress toward the denuclearization of the North, despite their historic nature. Efforts have since stalled. So, what does the announcement of the possible peace treaty draft means? Especially, not much. For now, whatever deal the US and South Korean diplomats make on the draft language, it would still need approval within their respective governments. Of course, North Korea would have to agree, and as the party to the armistice, so would China. But there is some room for optimism. South Korean Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong said Wednesday that North Korea has been quickly and positively responding to North Korea's movement to declare the end of the Korean War. And Kim Yo-jong, sister of the North Korean leader, in September termed the South Korean president's proposal to declare an end to the war interesting and admirable idea, but questioned the timing and demanded a hostile policy against the North must be withdrawn first. North Korea has yet to respond in detail about the declaration, though, even though China, Chung said.